we IT people have a tendency to want to use the latest, greatest things, the latest drivers that come out, the latest updates, latest feature updates from Windows, latest hardware, all that kind of stuff. So we are willing to live on the bleeding edge. Part of that's because if something goes wrong, we kind of know how to fix or what caused the problem in the first place. However, it's not really ideal for our users if we apply that same bleeding edge technology to those folks, right? Because they need to stay productive. That's why we have things such as a pilot program, because it will still involve certain users, but not all of the users in a broad deployment or an implementation. Instead, we're going to be able to use a smaller scope of those users. But one of the things we want to establish, first of all, is why it's even important to use a pilot program. One of the things that's important there really is that it's important for the IT team to establish a consistent rollout method. Because if you have, let's say you have a rollout involving software updates and the latest Windows feature update. Well, if one administrator installs the latest feature update and then he installs the software and then he installs another piece of hardware, but another administrator mixes up that order and does it differently. Oops, I just hit my microphone. Well, then if a problem occurs, we may not really know which thing caused it because we did things in a different order. So it helps if you have some consistency there. The other thing you want to do is to test under continuous usage under normal, typical conditions for your users. You're going to have some buy-in with some of your users and some management approval as well, so that you can test these things out on certain users' computers. Then we also want to identify, of course, any problems that occur there. That's a big part of why we have a pilot test, so we can see what problems occurred and figure out what the solution is. It might be that we have some software that doesn't like the newest feature update from Windows because it changes the version number of Windows. Some software is designed to work with only a very specific and granular version of Windows, and after the feature update, if that version changes, it won't like it. It might hang, it might not launch, I don't know. Any number of kind of problems. We might find out that the vendor is working on an update. Once that comes out and is released, then we can continue on with our feature update, for example. We also want to gauge user response to the changes. I'll talk about that a little bit more later on, but we need to see how it's going to actually affect those users. And then at the end of that pilot program, we want to identify the level of success that we had. It might be that it wasn't very successful. We can't get the updates from our vendors that we need to in order to make the software compatible, and we might need to wait another 6 months or even a year before we can do it, or we might find out that everything worked out just fine. It's also important to understand the purpose of doing the pilot test, and a big part of that will be to determine the following kinds of items, such as feasibility. Is it really feasible for us to be able to roll all of this out? It might be that a certain update, this doesn't relate just to Windows, but could be anything, another piece of software or something we're trying out there. This update requires processors that we don't have. It requires a more amount of memory that we don't have. Maybe our machines, a lot of them have 2 gigabytes, and we really need 4. We just can't really afford to update, thousands of machines to 4 gigabytes. So it could be something like that. Could be time or timing, and that's another part of the feasibility as well, because it could be that maybe I'm a retail operation, and we found out that this update is going to take about a month and a half to deploy to our entire company. Well, that's not going to be feasible during certain periods of time. So we wouldn't want to do that probably between at least November through January and maybe February, because if we're a retail operation, the holiday season is a big part of our business, as well as are those returns that happen in January after the holiday season. We need to also look at the cost. Once again, maybe we do need to actually have this update, and in order to do that, we do have to upgrade all of our memory. That's going to cost a lot of money, so we're going to need to get buy-in from management. We're going to have to budget that out, see whether or not it's more feasible, really, to just replace machines, because maybe they're old in other ways as well. They don't have as much storage, the CPU's kind of old, maybe they're on their last legs anyway. So we need to look at a lot of those kinds of factors. And then also the amount of risk that is involved. Now, a big part of a pilot program is really to mitigate the risk as much as possible. That's why we have the pilot program, because we want to see the effect of it if it causes some kind of damage to our productivity. Once we know how much risk is involved, we can determine whether or not that is an acceptable level of risk or not. And then we also want to see how it might affect performance. That's another purpose for performing this pilot test. We want to see if after we perform this rollout of whatever it is, we want to see if it causes the machines to perform more slowly. Some updates actually increase performance. All right, so that should give you a pretty good idea on the importance of a pilot program and what its purpose is. Stick around for our next nugget where we will continue this discussion of implementing a pilot program. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.